Hi everyone, this is Dr. Victoria Nalule. So in today's discussion, I want to talk about the key aspects that we need to consider when we are building legal frameworks for sustainable development or for sustainability. So like we already mentioned, there are three main principles for sustainability. We have the environmental aspect, we have the economic aspect, and the social aspect. And connecting these to the various UN Sustainable Development Goals, we notice that with each goal, in order to achieve the goal or to achieve the targets in the UN SDGs, first we need an enabling legal framework. But remember, the principles of sustainability have been in existence for quite some time, but in the 21st century, we are seeing lots of focus and effort to ensure that everything we do complies with the principles of sustainability. All the businesses are taking into consideration the sustainable principles. So in this discussion, we want to focus on the aspect of the legal framework. What kind of framework can balance all the various sustainable principles? But remember, some of the legal frameworks have been in existence for quite some time. Some might be outdated, and as such, they might be challenged that they do not comply with the principles of sustainability. So does this mean that we need to build new legal frameworks, or we need to amend the existing legal frameworks? So this discussion, we want to focus on that. And I'll just start with the slides. So basically in this discussion, we want to talk about how we can build legal frameworks for sustainable development. Just by introduction, I'm Dr. Victoria Nalule. I am an energy and mining expert and also climate change. And I've authored several books in the area. So far, I have 7 books covering different aspects: land law and extractive industries, energy transitions, and the future of the energy sector, which is also really good when we're talking about the principles of sustainability, mining and the law, exploring the social and environmental impacts, energy poverty and access challenges, international arbitration in the energy and mining sectors, and then the land reforms in the mining sector. Actually, this is an edited book with Rotridge, where we talk about the need to reform the mining legal frameworks to be able to comply with the principles of sustainability. So in today's discussion, we want to focus on specifically the legal frameworks for sustainable development. And through case studies, we shall look at the relevant laws and policies. And also, we have to understand that with the legal framework, we have to look at it at 4 levels: the international level, regional level, national level, and also the local level or the community level. So basically, through this discussion, you should be able to spotlight the impact of the legal framework and the regulatory frameworks on achieving the sustainable development goals, identify the relevant international, regional, and national laws with respect to sustainability, understand how law can impact or it can be impacted by the various UN Sustainable Development Goals, and then analyze the different SDGs and the relevant legal frameworks. So to start with, we need to first ask ourselves, what does the legal framework encompass? So this includes not only legislations, but the legal framework would also encompass the administrative framework, the institution framework, because at the end of the day, you can have the laws, you can have the policies, but if these laws cannot be implemented, if you don't have strong institutions to implement the laws, then the legal framework will be useless. And that's the same thing with the administrative framework. We should be able to have strong administrative frameworks that can be able to ensure that the laws are effective and they can be implemented. And it doesn't only stop at the legislations, but the laws should also comply with the economic, political, social, and environmental aspects. That's how you can measure if the legal framework is effective or not. And like I mentioned earlier, the legal framework can be understood at 4 levels. At the international level, you would mostly have the international treaties. At the regional level, you would have regional initiatives or even regional treaties. At the national level, that's why you have like the national laws and policies that have to be implemented by governments. And then at the local level, you find for some countries, they have local laws, local council laws or community laws. So all those really have to be taken into consideration when you're discussing the legal framework. So depending on what you want to do in this class, obviously, in this session, it's broad. But if you're to effectively discuss the legal framework, you should at least pick a topic, pick a sector, and also get like case studies, like countries or regional case studies if it's like a regional organization, like the EU, European Union, or the African Union, or Asian organizations. So that's the only way you can have an effective discussion on the legal framework. Otherwise, you can't, it's impossible to discuss the legal framework when you're covering all the different sectors, all the countries, all the international organizations. So just to be mindful, in this discussion, we're just giving a broad overview, but it's always good to focus on a specific sector, specific country. You can do like a comparative analysis and analyze if the legal framework in the specified case study incorporates the pillars of sustainability, that is the economy. Does it support the economy or economic development? Does it take into consideration the society, the people? Does the legal framework really ensure sustainability with respect to how people are working? And also the most important pillar is the environmental aspect, because at the end of the day, you can have economic development and people will be taken out of poverty, or their livelihoods would improve, but at the expense of the environment. So for the legal framework to be effective, it has to balance the 3 pillars of sustainability. That is the economy, the economic aspect, society, the people, and then the environmental aspects. So in your free time, you should be able to look at the relevant legal frameworks in different sectors. You can choose a sector of your choice. Could it be the energy sector? Because my expertise is in energy. Could it be the mining sector? I also have expertise in mining. If you're interested in hospitality, you can look at the legal frameworks that govern this sector. If it's the transport sector, look at the legal framework that governs the transport sector. If it's foods, you can also look at that. If it's fashion, you can look at the fashion. And then education, look at education, and various other sectors, and ask yourself, do the relevant laws, policies, regulations, are they effective to comply with all the principles of sustainability, or are they ineffective? Like I mentioned, it's impossible for us to look at the legal framework in all these sectors. Even technology, if a point interested in technology or artificial intelligence, you can look at the legal framework and see how it complies with the principles of sustainability. And if you see any gap, you identify how can we build a legal framework in that particular sector to ensure that it complies with the principles of sustainability. So we need to ask ourselves, is it practical to have a legal framework that encompasses all the UN SDGs? Because if you look at the UN SDGs, they're all interconnected. They're interconnected, but at the same time, you need different laws to be able to achieve the various goals of the SDGs. Now, like goal 1 on poverty eradication, the first thing would be to really empower the economies of different countries. Now we're talking about the sustainable principle focused on the economy. But are you going to empower countries economically to take them out of poverty at the expense of the environmental aspect or pillar of sustainability? So what can we do to ensure that a legal framework takes into consideration all the UN SDGs, but then at the same time encompasses all the 3 principles of sustainability? So in reality, that is hard to achieve because you realize that some goals, in order to achieve some goals, it has to be at the expense of other goals, other UN SDGs. For instance, in order to achieve goal 13 on climate action, you have to reduce on the sectors that contribute to greenhouse gas emission. And perhaps some of these sectors are a source of income for different people, and they see the sectors as a way of eradicating poverty in their countries. So you find that balancing goal 1 and goal 13 on climate action might be hard. And the question would be, how can you have a legal framework that encompasses goal 1 and goal 13 and can also encompass goal 7 on energy access, but at the same time also complies with the 3 principles of sustainability? So in practice, that is really hard to find. And it's the same thing with other UN SDGs. If you look at SDG 9 on build resilient infrastructure, promote inclusive and sustainable industrialization, this first would require trade laws that are effective, construction laws, and the question would be, are these laws in this sector that are needed to achieve the UN SDG 9, are they complying with the 3 pillars of sustainability, or they're not complying with them? For instance, with industrialization, it comes with various challenges. Obviously, it takes people out of poverty, thus achieving UN SDG 1. But then at the same time, industrialization is linked to lots of carbon emissions. The factories, the industries, the kind of fuels they use in industrialization and in all these industries, they are all against UN SDG 13 on climate action. So you find that sometimes balancing the goals of UN SDG 9 and balancing other goals might be hard, especially in analyzing which pillar of sustainability should be given more focus or more weight and which pillar should be downplayed. It's the same thing with the energy laws. And in this discussion, we shall look at some of the energy laws. You find that some laws would really focus on ensuring that people have affordable energy. You can pay your bills, energy bills at home. You have access to modern energy like electricity. But how is this energy got? Is it got from renewable energy or from fossil fuels? And you find that sometimes achieving this goal might also be against the principles of sustainability. And this in most cases is also reflected in the various laws and policies. So this makes the issue of building a legal framework for sustainable development a bit tricky, because in practice, it can be hard to achieve all the principles of sustainability in one legal framework. But however, what can be done is to ensure that the various laws that are enacted do try to balance the political, economic, social, and environmental aspects that are in alignment with the principles of sustainability. So like I mentioned, for you to be able to understand how you can build an effective legal framework, first you need to focus on a few sectors. You can focus on artificial intelligence and look at the various laws in this sector. Are they complying with the principles of sustainability? If not, what can be done to ensure that the legal framework is in compliance with the principles of sustainability at the international level, national level, regional level, and also at the local level? The other sector, which is obviously of interest, is the natural resources sector. you can ask yourself, for countries that have the natural resources, are there legal frameworks in compliance with the principles of sustainability? And if not, what can be done to ensure that we build an effective legal framework? So moving forward, for you to be able to understand the session and to get the best out of it, get a specific sector, focus on a case study so that you can analyze the legal framework in that sector, in that country, at the international level, regional level, international, national level, and find out if the legal framework is really effective. So that's what we're going to do also in this session. So starting at the regional legal frameworks, if we take the European Union as an example, and you look at their artificial intelligence and energy laws, you notice that they have gone ahead to establish various laws to enhance AI and to enhance energy security. For instance, in 2021, the European Commission published its proposal for the regulation of artificial intelligence, that is draft AI regulation. So this is a regulation at the regional level, at the level of the EU. And it's the same thing with the energy sector. From 1994, they had in existence the Energy Charter Treaty, which is an international agreement that establishes a multilateral framework for cross-border cooperation in the energy industry, principally the fossil fuel industry. So this is a treaty that was established at the time when fossil fuels were playing a major role in industrialization, in our economies, and every country really wanted to secure investments in fossil fuels, or even to ensure that they can import or export the fossil fuels in their countries, from their countries, or to neighboring countries. So in 2021, you see the focus is more on artificial intelligence. And in 2021 also, you notice that the focus is more on clean energy. So as we're going to see in today's session, you find that the legal frameworks, the 1990 legal frameworks, are now being challenged because it's argued they do not comply with the principles of sustainability. So here you notice the change in legal frameworks. It's not something that is constant. In the 1990s, in the 1980s, the focus was on industrialization, economic development, and little focus was given on environmental protection. But in the 21st century, the focus is on the principles of sustainability, most especially environmental protection. So you find that the laws that were enacted in the 1990s are now being challenged as being ineffective because they do not comply with the 21st century move to first transition to a low carbon economy, and then second, to ensure sustainability. And in May, this is what I call the different generation of laws. So if you look at the different generation of laws, you notice that each generation really had a specific aim, and it was focused on tackling the challenges that were being experienced in that generation. Like I mentioned, in the 1990s, it was more about economic development, industrialization. In the 21st century, it's more about balancing economic development and environmental protection. So as we're going to see, some legal frameworks that existed in the 1990s are under threat right now. Now, at the international level, if we look at the principles of sustainability and we focus on the environmental principle, you notice that there are various legal frameworks that have been put in place to promote the environmental principles of sustainability. We are all aware of the 2015 Paris Agreement on climate change and the related international treaties and strategies on environmental protection. You can look out for those treaties in your free time and look at how they have been evolving with respect to achieving the environmental principle of sustainability. In recent years, the climate change movement, and in particular the annual UN COP negotiations, such as COP26 last year and COP27 this year, demonstrate that legislation and the legal framework can deliver more sustainable and equitable outcomes for all the stakeholders. So here we are looking at the international aspects of balancing sustainable development and also ensuring equity for all stakeholders. Because if you've been following the discussions with respect to these COP26 and COP27, the question has always been, for the countries that have not yet achieved economic development, how can they tackle this climate change crisis? Why should they focus on the principle of environmental protection without looking at the need to eradicate poverty in their countries? So equity or justice have become some of the pillars for the legal frameworks for sustainable development. The legal frameworks at the international level should be just, should be equitable. No country should be left behind. No communities should be left behind because of the ineffective or unjust legal frameworks. So that also poses a dilemma, because there are some countries that have really achieved economic development and now they want to focus on environmental protection, but there are other countries that are still poor, and especially for the countries that are relying on natural resources, and they feel they need to first eradicate poverty before entirely focusing on environmental protection. So how do we ensure an equitable and just legal framework for sustainable development? So moving forward in future, if we are to talk about the legal framework, the first thing is to ensure that it takes into consideration all the needs of the different legal stakeholders. No country should be left behind because of an unjust international legal framework. And here we're talking about the international legal frameworks because at the end of the day, they impact all countries in the global north and in the global south, in Europe, in Asia, in Africa, in Latin America, in the Middle East. They are all likely to be impacted by the international legal frameworks on sustainability. So these legal frameworks at the international level, the first thing they have to ensure is the principle of equity and justice. As we're moving towards sustainability, as we're moving towards achieving all the three principles of sustainability, we have to ensure that no country is left behind. And one thing you need to focus on, or you should ask yourself, how can we ensure equity at the international level when building a legal framework for sustainability? That is something that you really have to look out for and ask yourself. But remember, besides the international legal frameworks, we also have the regional legal frameworks. And in here, I focus on the economic pillar because remember, one of the pillars of sustainability is the economy. And if you look at the European Union, you notice that they have put in place various laws or legal frameworks aimed at promoting foreign direct investment. Because when we're talking about the economic pillar, we also have to realize that to develop the various sectors of the economy, you need capital, you need massive investments. And how are you going to attract that investment? One way of attracting investments is to ensure that you have an appealing legal framework for foreign direct investments, because investors, they're not voluntary, they're not NGOs, they're not non-government organizations, they're not doing things voluntarily, they're focused on getting profits. So how do you balance promoting investments in your country, but then at the same time ensuring that all the principles of sustainability are being promoted or taken into consideration? Are you going to promote investment at the expense of the economic, at the expense of the environmental pillar? Are you going to promote investments at the expense of the social pillar? We have seen many people in different communities, societies, who have come up to to object investments in their communities. And as such, we have seen a rise in the concepts such as achieving a social license to operate, whereby the communities, the local communities, have to give you that acceptance for you to invest or carry out projects in their region or in their communities. So that takes us into to the aspect of balancing the economic pillar, where you're attracting investors, but then at the same time ensuring that the society or the people are not left behind. Because at the end of the day, if you fail to balance the economic pillar and the social pillar, you find that some investors would make lots of losses because of the protests in the local communities. So that is something that should really be taken into consideration. So looking at the EU, you notice that foreign direct investment contributes to the union's growth by enhancing its competitiveness, creating jobs. So when you're talking about the social pillar, you're also thinking about the people, do they have the jobs? And economies of scale, bringing in capital. Capital is very key for every sector. Technologies, we're in an era of technological advancement, innovation, expertise, and by opening new markets for the union's exports. It supports the objectives of the investment plan for Europe and contributes to other union projects and programs. So in summary, you're looking at the impact of foreign direct investment on not only ensuring the economic pillar of sustainability, but also the social pillar of sustainability, especially with respect to the creation of jobs. So that is very key in that you have to ask yourself, as you are promoting the economic pillar, as you are promoting the foreign direct investment in your country, you also have to be aware of the other pillars of sustainability. And in recent years, we have seen that many countries now are focused on formulating legal frameworks that encompass the ESGs, that is the environmental, social, and governance issues, because the ESGs, they are also connected to the principles of sustainability. You see the environmental aspect, the social aspect, and then the governance aspects. And in this regard, the global ESG disclosure standards for investment products are the first global voluntary standards for disclosing how an investment product considers ESG issues in its objectives, investment strategy, and stewardship activities. So here you are seeing how in the different investments, like we've seen here, different regional organizations and countries are focused on promoting foreign direct investment. But now at the international level, we're seeing that there are voluntary standards for these investors to show that they're incorporating the principles of sustainability, specifically by showing how their investment product consider the ESG issues. So this is a very good example of how various legal frameworks are taking into consideration the principles of sustainability. So you see at all levels, there are different legal frameworks focused on promoting sustainable development. And this is also a good example you have to look at. So we've already talked about the different economic laws at the regional level. Now at the national level, most countries have investment laws, they have economic policies, and all these are intended to enhance the economic pillar of sustainability. If you look at Australia, they have the foreign investment policy, which is very recent, of 2022. If you look at Benin, they have the Benin Investment Code of 2020, that is also really very recent. If you look at Chile, they have a framework law for foreign investment of 2015. And if you look at China, they have the foreign investment law of the People's Republic of China of 2019. So all these laws at the national level are intended to promote investments in the different sectors of the country. So the question would be, do these investment laws, do they encompass all the various pillars of sustainability? Because obviously they're encompassing the aspect of economic pillar, but what about the social pillar and the environmental pillar? So in your case studies, you can get a country of your choice and analyze if the different economic laws comply with the social pillar and environmental pillar. So one thing we have to analyze moving forward is some of the laws that were considered effective. Nowadays, they do not comply with the pillars of sustainability. And there have been various instances where countries are objecting those laws at the regional level, at the international level, or even at the national level. So this brings us to the topic of legal review. It is important for the governments and other stakeholders to do thorough reviews of the various legal frameworks to analyze if they align with the principles of sustainability. Legal and regulatory review presents policy options and recommendations for governments to develop appropriate legal frameworks that align with sustainability principles. So it's always good to review the laws at least every 5 years to analyze if they really comply with the principles of sustainability or not. And some questions you should consider are the laws and policies in your country, are they sustainable? What dilemma needs to be addressed? So look at the laws in your country, find out if there's sustainability, and if not, present the gaps and show how sustainability can be reflected in the legal frameworks in your country and in the specific sector you've picked. So for instance, here, I look at the Energy Charter Treaty as a case study at the international level and also regional level, because remember initially it was a treaty focused on the EU, but now they expanded in 2015 by modernizing it to also invite other countries outside the EU. So it's more of an international treaty. And in recent years, we have seen many EU states deserting the Energy Charter Treaty. And the question is, why are they deserting it? And the treaty is now reflecting, is one of the legal frameworks that reflects the need to review the various treaties or laws to ensure that they comply with the principles of sustainability. For instance, for the countries that are deserting the treaty, they are arguing that the treaty is not taking to the principles of sustainability, specifically the environmental principle, whereby they do argue that it's more focused on protecting fossil fuel investments. And yet we are in an era of energy transitions where countries are more focused on transitioning to a low carbon economy, on investing more in renewables. So last year, Investigate Europe calculated that the Energy Charter Treaty protects at least 344.6 billion euros worth of fossil fuel infrastructure in Europe. So this is the argument most people are giving, whereby they are saying the Energy Charter Treaty is not complying with the principles of sustainability because it protects fossil fuels. But the question is, like we've already mentioned, investments are investments. And for any country, if you sign a treaty, if you sign a legal framework, you should be able to enforce the legal framework. You should be able to comply with the provisions. If it's a contract, comply with the provisions of the contract. Other than that, if you fail to comply, if you breach the provisions, then you are liable to pay damages. So in my opinion, yes, the treaty might be protecting investments in fossil fuels, but like any treaty or any legal framework, that is what they have to do. And like I mentioned, it was enacted at the time where fossil fuels were playing a big role. So most countries signed the treaty, and they felt at that time it's what they needed to promote or to attract more investments in fossil fuels. But now, because countries are shifting to a low carbon economy, they feel it's no longer working for them. But at that time, it was working for them. And now in the 21st century, they feel, no, the charter is not taking into consideration all the principles of sustainability. But remember, it also, energy is not just fossil fuels, but it also includes renewables. And so if you look at the German example, the German energy company, RWE, recently used the charter to sue Netherlands for 1.4 billion euros because the country brought forward its coal phase out. So this is the implication of the legal frameworks. Once you breach the provisions that were originally agreed upon, you are liable to pay damages. And it's not only an issue with the Energy Charter Treaty, because remember the legal framework also looks at the relevant contracts you sign with investors. For instance, for most countries in the global south, they often include stabilization clauses in their energy agreements or even mining agreements. And the impact of a stabilization clause is the same as the impact of the energy charter. So if countries are saying that the energy charter is no longer relevant in the 21st century, a movement should come and say even the stabilization clauses that limit the government's power to introduce laws that are likely to cause an economic impact on the investors should be outlawed in the 21st century because the impact is the same. So here, basically, what I'm trying to show you is how the legal frameworks change and how they're being challenged in the 21st century, all in the name of environmental protection and ensuring that they comply with the principles of sustainability. So how do countries react to unsustainable legal frameworks? Looking at the energy charter, you notice that countries often threaten to leave this kind of legal frameworks. For instance, Italy left the charter. Spain, the Netherlands, Poland, and France have also indicated intentions to leave. So this is how countries react to legal frameworks that they feel are unsustainable. They leave. But it should be the same thing with the various contracts, because with the legal framework, it doesn't only stop at the international level, regional level, but also you have to look at the national legal frameworks. Do they balance the principles of sustainability or they are not? So in your free time, try to give me your opinion of how your country can balance the legal frameworks for sustainability. And yeah, that's it for now. But at the end of the day, the legal framework is key in ensuring that we achieve all the principles of sustainability. And it's hard to balance that because, like we've seen with the issue of the Energy Charter Treaty, it's not a bad treaty because initially when it was enacted, it was to promote economic development. But now it's being questioned because they feel it's only focused on the economic pillar of sustainability, leaving out the environmental pillar. But is that the issue? Is it the same issue in your countries with respect to the various laws you have? Look at the contracts your governments have signed. Are they sustainable or not? All that is legal framework. And moving forward, as we're building a legal framework for sustainable development, the only way that framework can be effective is when it balances the three main pillars of sustainability. That is the environmental pillar, economic pillar, and the social pillar. Other than that, it will be hard to achieve an effective legal framework for sustainable development. Thank you very much for your time. Bye-bye.